Welcome to another episode of the Millennials and Community Podcast. This week, we channel our inner Ted Lasso by being curious and not judgmental. We discuss why developing our skill sets is so important, how you can have both hard and soft skills, whatever that means, and why developing your people skills is one of the best things to improve on. Thank you for being part of our community. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Millennials and Community Podcast. I'm Carlo. That's Matt.
What's up, everyone?
He turned his hat around. I changed my shirt. It's a brand new day. So we got another great episode coming up here for you. Super excited about this one because this is going to be a really great opportunity to hear your opinions on it, to kind of expand my knowledge about something that I've never really given a lot of thought into. Today's episode is the difference between soft skills and hard skills. And you're going to get a little bit deeper into that, explain it to my little piddly brain and help me understand more. But before we get into that, what is the most impactful learning moment you've ever had?
Yeah, and I mean, to pull back the curtains a little bit, like I created a lot of these icebreaker questions, and so I wrote this down, and I've been struggling with an answer ever since. A lot of the times I'll like build a question around a story or something that I already have. This one I didn't, and I changed my mind a bunch. I did my graduate studies at Royal Roads University, which is in Victoria, well, just outside Victoria on Vancouver Island. For those of you who are not Canadian, that's the very, very west coast of Canada. Yeah. Small little island right off of the west coast of Canada outside of Vancouver. So the way that my program was structured, it was mostly a remote thing. I did most of my coursework online by correspondence, but we had the opportunity to spend a couple of weeks at various parts of my degree on campus. You know, the idea being we get to spend that time working with your cohorts that you're in the class with, doing group projects, doing this really intensive work, and it was intense. And I remember the first time that I got the chance to go to Royal Roads, and I should mention too that I was studying global leadership. As you can imagine, there's some pretty cool people that would be like interested. I'm not saying that as like trying to pat myself on the back, but there's some really, really cool people who are interested in the field of global leadership. And so for me, I think the most powerful learning moment was spending 2 weeks in this very intensive learning environment with this cohort of 25 or so other people that have just like this vested interest in trying to make the world a better place through understanding how the world functions and the people and the cultures within it. And it was by no means like warm and fuzzy all the time. There was some pretty significant conflicts that happened over the course of that week, to the point where like it resulted in somebody like actually getting removed from the program.
Wow.
So there was a lot that happened. That was the time when I experienced my first like anxiety attack, where I just like I was shaking and cold sweating and just like overwhelmed by how daunting the world is. But in spite of all those things, I think that it provided kind of the context for the most impactful learning moment. And I learned a lot of things. It's not like I learned one thing, but that was really where I experienced the biggest rush of learning at one particular time.
Cool. For me, I can't really put my finger on a single awe-inspiring moment, but I find a lot of exhilaration in those moments of figuring something out. Now, what do I mean by that? Like, I do a lot of technical work. And, you know, a really good example of this would be when I was learning how to do 3D modeling. Now, with something so technical, with something that has like a piece of software that you're learning, there are many moments where you're like, I know that this is what I need to do. I need to create this object in this way, but I don't know how to do it. And when you figure out what tool it is and what order of operations is required to allow you to do that thing, there's this little like moment, because now you can rethink the way you do so many other things. And anytime I'm working on anything technical, or I'm learning how to do something new, or I'm helping a client with something different, and you discover this new way of doing something, I think that is so cool, because it just opens up your mind and giving you this opportunity for new ways of thinking about how to solve a problem. And to me, that is just massively impactful every single time it happens. And the cool thing about it, and we've talked about this in past episodes, is this idea of constantly learning new skills. The cool thing about it is that it never diminishes its excitement, no matter how many times it happens. Every single time that moment, that light bulb hits, you're like, this is the coolest thing ever. And I really, really enjoyed that about learning.
I love that.
Yeah.
So we kind of mentioned a little bit off the top what this episode is going to be about today. And I think it's important because over the past couple of seasons of the Mac podcast, we've really focused really heavily on personal and professional growth. It's been a theme throughout, talking about value. How can we create value, maximize value, improve the value that we bring to the communities in which we're a part of? And, it kind of occurred to us offline, like outside of recording, we were having a conversation about like how we actually kind of prioritize and think about the way that we actually do that kind of development. And for all the things that the two of us have very much in common, this is one where I think we diverge quite heavily in terms of the way that we prioritize what we are trying to get better at and how we seek to get better at it. So, we're going to talk today about soft skills, hard skills. What are they? How do we think about them? But we also want to talk about how each of us thinks about prioritizing skill development, and to what end, like what actually is going to be the purpose or the outcome of prioritizing those sorts of things. So I guess as a starting point, like we can start by kind of defining soft skill. This was actually a big part of the conversation, is we were like sitting across the table and Carlo's like, so like, how do you actually define soft skills? So I had to challenge myself and to see if I was actually defining soft skill based on what the world considers. So I pulled a couple of definitions. So the Google, which maybe we shouldn't be using that now that they're getting charged in some places for having an illegal monopoly on search engines. But some nondescript search engine said that a soft skill is personal attributes that enable somebody to interact effectively and harmoniously with other people, whereas hard skills are the specific abilities, capabilities, and skill sets that an individual can possess and demonstrate in a measured way that are typically learned skills enabling individuals to perform job-specific tasks. So, and I was nice to see this because it really kind of, I guess, stands behind what I think of in terms of soft skills, which is like the people stuff, whereas the hard skills is like, how do I actually do a thing? Versus the soft skills of like, how do I do a thing with other humans? So I guess like right off the top, what are some of your reactions to those definitions?
Well, so the way that this kind of came about, like Matt said, we were in this kind of off-camera conversation where I was kind of explaining that I was having some difficulties at work, and none of the difficulties were me not knowing how to do something. They were, though, this idea of like, well, how do I properly communicate that to my team to allow us to work together better so that we're not going to have these problems that we've been having? And as somebody who has, to toot my own horn a little bit, been rather blessed with good people skills, the ability to articulate myself, to have a decent sense of leadership kind of just naturally occurring to me, it was definitely a challenge to all of a sudden have you say, well, you need to develop your soft skills. So what do you mean I have to develop my soft skills? I know how to do these things. I'm gifted in them. And it was very much a humbling moment to be like, no, that doesn't mean you can't improve. Yeah. So when we think about the kind of the definition of it, I had never really thought about the fact that, your people skills are a soft skill. I just thought it was who you are as a human being. You're either good with people or you aren't, right? So to have it laid out in this, very Webster's dictionary kind of way, I think is effective. because even now, after we'd been talking about this and after I've been kind of sitting with it for a while, I didn't think a soft skill was so specific. An attribute that enables someone to interact effectively and harmoniously with other people. It is 100% people-based. I thought it was so much more all-encompassing than that. And I think now that it's been kind of narrowed down in my mind like that, it's going to help me approach it a little bit differently. So I think that's really, really cool. So if we were to kind of break this down a little bit further, let's focus in on a hard skill. So when we talk about a hard skill, we're talking about, going back to that 3D modeling analogy, my ability to make that model, use the software, actually make use of it, right? Where the soft skill might be, how do I instruct a person to do that thing?
Yeah.
Right? So they very much are intermingled. And I think that's why it's been a little bit more difficult for me to kind of reconcile with it. So, you said you found these definitions off of Google. Do you agree with them? Like, are you happy with that, the way that that's laid out, or is there a change you might make to it?
No, I definitely, it definitely captures how I think about these things. I from a metaphor, all of you know I love my metaphors. I think of it like this: like a hard skill is the hammer head, right? Like the purpose of a hammer is to drive in a nail. And so you have to have a hammer head that is of composition so that it's going to functionally be able to drive a nail into a surface, right? Whereas, and that's the hard skill, right? Is the functionality of a thing. Whereas the soft skill would be like the grip that I have on it. It's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily matter what the handle is made of, other than the fact that it's going to make it easier to use the hammer if the handle is maybe has a nice wrapping of a hand grip, or is a polished wood so you're not getting slivers in your hand, right? And so I guess when I think about this, does it really affect the functionality of a hammer if I'm getting slivers in my hand because the handle of the hammer is so rough? No, but it's sure going to limit how useful I am in employing it. It's going to limit my ability to like get other people to use that hammer. And, it's going to be far less enjoyable of an experience, which might also limit. And so I think about these things in the same way. Hard skills are certainly really, really, really important. And I think that hard skills are critical to be learned kind of in the context of the job in which they need to be done. But my priority throughout my life has always been trying to continue to build and develop my soft skills, aka my ability to use the tools once they're contextually provided to me. And so, that's kind of evident in my education too. Like I took a business degree, but I didn't focus in any of the like classic, like technical business things of accounting or finance or whatever. I took a general business degree and tried to get as much people stuff out of it as I could. Took a degree in leadership for the same reason. I wanted that to really be the foundation that kind of stood up for itself, so that when I get into a position to learn skills, I'm in a better position to learn information from other people, because I hopefully have been able to bolster my soft skills.
Which would you say is more important?
So 100%, I think people skills are more important. And there's a number of reasons why I think that. Even if you're in a world where you have zero interaction with other people in the course of your life or your work, there is so much to be learned that is going to be, you're going to be functionally, for some reason my brain just went into Spanish and I barely know any Spanish. You're going to be functionally mandated to have contact with other people, whether they are coworkers or clients or something. There's going to be some way that you're going to have to cross with other people. Ultimately, it doesn't matter how good you are at a certain thing. If you don't possess the ability to like take that and deliver it in a gift wrapped box to a customer in the way that you communicate or whatever, then those things are going to fall flat. So I think people skills are absolutely more important. I also think, and maybe this is a rabbit hole that we can go into a little bit, I think that as we see AI getting ever more prevalent in the world, that a lot of the hard skills that we currently possess are going to be relatively redundant because of the way that AI is going to be able to expedite the way in which these things are done, which means that to a higher degree, the thing that sets me apart from AI is my ability to actually be a human. And so in that case too, I really am doubling down on this idea that like, I've got to be able to resonate and connect with humans in the best way that I can, because that is a skill that AI cannot make redundant.
Sure. I'm really intrigued about the idea of AI here, and I want to talk about it, but there's something I want to touch on first. Yeah. When I think about this, newly gained definition of soft skills, to me, that is going to be significantly more important because it is going to put you in the position to better learn the hard skills. Now, the best example I can kind of give of that is if you go to apply for a job, and that job is a very technical job running a piece of machinery, there is going to have to be someone that teaches you how to run that machine.
Yes.
But if you interview very, very poorly, you are not going to get that job.
Absolutely.
And you will not be put in the position to learn how that machine works.
Yep.
So if you don't develop the soft skills in whatever way possible that allows you to come across articulate, that allows you to come across in a way that is, pleasing to others, you're never going to be around the kind of people that are willing to teach you whatever that skill be. Now, we do live in a world where, you can learn almost anything you want off of YouTube or off of, some sort of online class, which is great. But it is arguable that the best way to learn is through hands-on experience. It is through mentorship. So without having that soft skill to put you in that position, I think you'd really be missing out on some of the best learning opportunities out there for those hard skills. And that's, again, a realization I'm kind of coming to here, that I have always been rather blessed with these soft skills and have been given these opportunities to learn. But maybe one of the struggles I'm having right now is that, hey, you got to develop those soft skills and allow yourself to fall into these places where you can learn more of these hard skills. And I think that's a really cool thing to kind of realize.
And it's a really interesting thing you bring up. And I'm sure that you're certainly not alone in this idea that the way that we interact with people is kind of just like a relatively static thing that comes along with our personality. I'm sure that a lot of people think that what's dangerous about that sort of a mindset is it puts us in a position where we think that other people hold more responsibility for our communications with them than they actually do. And what I mean by that is, if we kind of live in this world of like how I show up and how I interact with other people is a static thing and is kind of based on whatever combination of how extrovert I am, how funny I am, how loud I am, whatever kind of like mishmash of other personality attributes. The problem is we see a unsuccessful communication with somebody, whether it's just we're not getting each other or there's even some sort of a conflict. We see that as, at best, like we're just like not made to communicate with each other. And at worst, we put the blame on that person for being, a bad communicator themselves, right? And I really, really, really harp on this idea that when I'm communicating with somebody, my job as a communicator is not to say a thing. It's to make sure that the thing that I say is heard. I think I've said this in a recent episode. I can't harp on this enough because the mindset of I'm going to communicate so that you're hearing me is a very different one than I'm going to communicate what I need you to hear. Those are very different mindsets, and I think that we have to be in a position to understand that our people skills, communication skills is one of them. Our people skills are dynamic. They can be improved, changed, developed. And if we kind of come at that from a sense of understanding that our people skills are fluid and changeable, then we're actually better able to take accountability for how we show up in interactions with other people.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that you take a moment to kind of reflect and check yourself on this, because I very recently had an experience that really drove this point home to me. I was having a meeting at work there was a very obvious cultural divide between myself and the people I was working with. And it ended up leading to them feeling that I didn't treat them with the respect that they deserved. Now, I'm not going to go into details. There's reasons for the way that they were treated. Could I have handled it better? Yes. And that was the point for me to take away, is that as good as I feel I am with people, and as good as these soft skills are, I could have handled it better. I can develop these skills a little bit more so that this is not something that will happen in the future. And even if this scenario never presents itself again, I will know how to handle it, and it will hopefully leak into other things. So I want to swing back around to this impact of AI. Have you seen a movie called Hidden Figures?
No.
Okay, wonderful movie. It is the story about the supporting people in NASA that helped to allow them to do their first space flight. Okay, so like we're talking the first time they orbited the planet. Yeah. All right, very early stages. And all of these supporting characters, it focuses on the colored people that were, part of this. In specific, a group of women that were called what are called computers. They were the ones that did all the math before we had computers. So I'm not going to go into the whole story of the movie. It is a fantastic watch based off of a true story. But at one point, they started to introduce a computer, an actual computer called an IBM. Now, if you're not familiar with the original computers, these ran off of punch cards. So if you wanted to give an instruction to a computer, you took a piece of paper that had like little holes that you could punch in it that would represent zeros and ones, and you would put it in the computer, and it then knew how to have that instruction. We didn't have keyboards and mice and all graphical interfaces that we have now. So this computer is being brought in to help do these calculations, effectively replacing this very talented group of mathematicians. So they would not be needed anymore.
Cool.
And one of the women in the story realizes that this is happening, and she takes it upon herself to learn how to use the IBM. She doesn't say, well, I'm going to be replaced, and she doesn't get mad about it. She says, this is the way the world is going. I must learn how to use this computer so that when the time comes, they're not going to get rid of me. They're going to need me to run the IBM. And it was really, really cool because this entire group of women, learn how to do it, and they become very crucial in the space program. But when we think about AI, one of the big things that you hear a lot of people talking about is, yes, AI will ultimately replace you. Okay? Almost anything that you do in terms of a computer can be at some point replaced by AI. I don't think anybody imagined that we would go after the creatives first rather than, the technical people.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But that is the direction we're going. Here's the thing, though. Just like any tool, if you don't know how to swing the hammer will never hit the nail, right? And this is very obvious. If you've never played with AI before, it's available on everything these days. I encourage you to find an AI image generator and try to get it to create an image for you exactly the way you want it. It is very difficult because you need to know how to punch the holes in the card so that this computer figures out what you want. You have to be able to give the instruction. So, when we think about this hard skills and this soft skills, to me, it's almost a mending of the two. Because a lot of these AIs are designed to use natural language models, which means that I can speak to it like I would speak to another person, and it would respond to me like a person, right? They're not trying to make you learn a programming language to interact with it. They want it to be able to interact with us normally. But that now means that my technical skill is to speak like a human to a computer so that it better understands me. You see the little bit of the brain twisties that's kind of going on there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So I think it's super cool because, somebody might look at a guy like me and, well, Carlo's better suited in the age of AI because he's, so technically literate and technology, comes easy to him. But arguably, someone with really good soft skills who knows how to very accurately communicate his wants to another person might actually be better in the age of AI because you know how to be very clear and concise and accurate with everything that you're requesting of that computer.
That's really, really.
Isn't that cool?
So what do we call the melding of hard and soft skills? Medium rare?
We should ask AI.
We can do that later. All right. Yeah. Medium rare skills. Now I just want steak. And now I'm just like sitting here thinking about that combination. That's really, really interesting. Right? And, you know, it certainly is an important argument to be made in defense of, obviously, I'm very biased towards people's skills. And I think that this next section, as we get into talking about this impact on millennials, is going to drive it home even more. I think that at least in the last few episodes, we've been talking a lot about millennials from the standpoint of not necessarily the millennial generation, but more so the age that we kind of currently find ourselves. This one, I think, is very, very generational. You know, you think about kind of the generations before us, Gen X, Gen Y, baby boomers, very much so, especially baby boomers, but Gen X too, to a certain degree. They stayed in the same job for often their whole career, if not decades, right? And so in that circumstance, while your ability to communicate with your coworkers was important, the hard skills and the things that you, to your point, were learning on the job were more critical, right? You're more concerned about how often or how well I'm able to do the tasks associated with this job over the course of my life. And so when we see millennials changing jobs with much more frequency in their career, I think that, again, it drives home the importance of having those soft skills. If I know that in every 3 to 5 years I'm going to be changing jobs, then it becomes more important, as you're saying, to understand how to learn and how to work with people, because the hard skill set that you're going to need is going to change and evolve as your career does. So I think that's kind of the argument why millennials need to focus on the soft skills relative to the generations older than us. I think relative to the generations younger than us, there's a really critical thing. I don't know if any of you kind of heard 2020 to 2023, somewhere in there, we had this weird thing happen. Like, it was a global pandemic. I don't know if you heard of it.
Briefly.
Yeah. But what it did, where the millennial generation was able to experience that for most of us, following a lot of the formative social experiences, Gen Z and Generation Alpha were really, really impacted in terms of like formative social experiences, whether it be college or grade school or whatever. And the pandemic really, really stunted a lot of the ability to have those social skills. Not to say that you don't have Gen Z and Gen Alpha that are very well socialized, but for a lot of people, it significantly stunted their ability to have these constructive, people-oriented skills and intuitions. And so from that standpoint, I think it really, really, really becomes incumbent on us as a millennial generation to try to kind of like support those generations or bolster that gap through our ability to interact with humans, appreciating that some people just didn't have that opportunity to form those really, really good skills in the same way that we would have growing up.
Yeah. And you know, I think we're going to actually talk about this in an upcoming episode, but there's almost this idea of us being the translators between the baby boomer generation and, you know, the Gen Z and Alpha generations, especially now that Gen Z is entering the workforce in such large numbers, right? So if you follow any sort of millennial creator on social media, they will usually have a video clip or a story to tell of, you know, well, here's my baby boomer boss who doesn't know how to make a PDF, makes 3 times my salary. Here's my Gen Z coworker who can run circles around me on a computer, but they have no way of communicating, right? And I have to be the one that burdens that, you know, shoulders the responsibility of being the middle management, right? It's a very intriguing kind of idea as we look at it generationally. Yeah. And I would also argue, because, you know, if we do have any baby boomers listening to this show, this is not an attack on you. I think it purely comes that there were different requirements, professionally speaking, when you started working than there are now.
Yeah.
Right? In so many different aspects. So, if you never really committed to keeping up on your soft skills, you would have never learned these things. It's kind of like slang, right? If you don't actually try to learn what the slang is, you don't know what it means, right? So I think it's really interesting. So if that's kind of the impact of millennials, and maybe even diving a little bit in the professional sense, in a community way, are our soft skills important? How does that impact us there? Because again, when you think about, hey, this is who I am with the people around me and my community and my loved ones. This is how I interact with them. What do you mean I have to commit and I have to learn and expand my ability to communicate with my family?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that I would have everybody that's listening kind of think about, in all of our worlds, whether it be our professional world, our families, our friend circles, there's the toxic person or the toxic people, right? When I say toxic person, instantly someone came to mind for you, whoever's listening out there. And we know that a toxic person in any given community has a disproportionate effect on that community, right? So we know that whatever's contributing to their toxicity, it generally comes down to a way that, like, however they are behaving is considered abrasive and is affecting the personal dynamics, whether it just be between you and them or between them and a broader group. So from a community standpoint, I think it's really important to reflect on the degree to which our people skills have the ability to, in best case scenario, like try to mitigate that toxic personality and be able to, maybe it is a close friend and they're going through some things, and so the toxicity is temporary. So you have the ability, the skills, the soft skills, to be able to hopefully show them compassion and empathy and try to understand what they're going through, have a difficult conversation with that person. So I think that's really, really important. But I think too, a lot of this is recognizing, a lot of the people skills is recognizing what people are the right people. Mm-hmm. And maybe it is the case that some of those toxic personalities need to, that you need to find a way to leave them behind, whether that means in a work setting, maybe, you need to look at moving on from that person, or if it's a personal setting, maybe you need to look at reducing the amount of time that you're spending with those people. So I think that's important. One of the things that I'm curious for your take on, a lot of people are invited into communities. Well, actually, I'm curious to your take on this. Do you think that people are invited into communities based on their level of competence or their level of people skills? And like, to what degree is this like a chicken egg thing? Like, do we invite them in because we perceive them to be competent humans, however we define that in the given community, and then like, do we keep them around because they're good people, or do we invite them in because they're good people and keep them around because they're competent humans? Like, how would you kind of assess?
That's kind of an interesting thing, because it's not something that you think about. You're kind of like, I like this person, I want them around me. But why? What is it that you like about them, right? So I think this is going to be very difficult to define, because we do so much in terms of relationships off of feeling, right? It's not necessarily what somebody might have said that will make you want to have them be part of your community. It's the way that they made you feel, right? And, if you look at it a little bit broader, it is arguable to say, well, because that person has good soft skills, has good people skills, has a way to articulate the way that they're speaking in a kind and approachable manner, that makes me feel comfortable around them and want to be with them. Because somebody who is very abrasive when they speak, you're not arguably going to want to spend as much time with that. But that's also not really true, because sometimes you have that abrasive friend and you hang out with him because he's a little bit more to the point and gruff about things. And, it's kind of nice to get that perspective. So I think it can be both, right? I think that there's definitely those communities that you want to be a part of and have people a part of because they all have great soft skills and you enjoy that aspect of it. But at the same time, I think that there can be the other ones where you're like, there's a potential for you to have great soft skills. And I can see it in you that you're a genuinely good person. Come hang out with us and we'll help you, come out of your shell, I guess would be a good way to put it. Right? Because sometimes you do meet those people like, you're there. I can see it. You just don't realize it yet. Right? So again, that comes down to another soft skill, which is what's your leadership ability?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it's really funny. I'm having this realization right now that we tend to, I'm not going to project and say we, I tend to think of like my own soft skills as being dynamic and changeable, but I don't very often give the people around me credit for the fact that their soft skills might be changeable too. Mm-hmm. And I guess you're sharing a really, really cool premise of like we all have the ability to see someone who maybe like is working on their stuff and we want to keep them around and see them improve. And I'm realizing too that I don't know that I give people enough credit for the fact that they are changeable and they are dynamic in their people-oriented skills in the same way that I value that I think I am.
Well, and that is kind of surprising to hear you say that, because I know that one of the big things for me that I absolutely adore is mentorship. I have not, unfortunately, had a great opportunity to be around a mentor in a while that I feel really, truly helps me improve. But I have had the opportunity in the past to be a mentor. And one of my favorite compliments to give is I want to make you aware that I have seen the growth in you. Mm. Like, if you ever want to see somebody come close to tears almost instantly, go and say how proud you are of them, of how they've grown. Nobody tells you that. Nobody will, like, it's so rare to have somebody come to say, and like, you have grown as a person, and watching you mature and watching you learn how to handle these things is amazing. So like, it surprises me to hear you say that, because you work with a fair amount of younger people and you are very much their first exposure to leadership in a corporate setting or a professional setting. So I know very much that if I were to ask some of your former younger coworkers, we were actually talking about this the other day, how like normally in your job, you expected level of turnover, but the turnover is not happening, right? That I think is a massive sense of credit that you should feel very proud of, because your people are looking at you as a leader and going, I gained so much from working with him that I don't want to move on, right? So I guess my challenge to you here would be, you're obviously enacting that opportunity for growth, people. Are you complimenting that when you do notice it? Right. And if now that you're maybe aware of it, are you taking the time to be like, what are the changes and the improvements that I'm noticing in these people? And then when you notice them, make them aware that you have noticed them.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that it's a hard thing. And I think the fact that I'm really like reflecting on this right now is really telling, because we've talked for the last 40 minutes about how much I put priority in this stuff, mm-hmm. and how much more important I think it is to develop people skills. Can you imagine somebody who like isn't quite sold on the idea yet that people skills are more important than hard skills, and how they might mentor in a similar way? Like that's a really, really interesting thing. And I certainly think that like I can do more to continue to acknowledge the growth and development in that way with some of the folks that I work with. I think that's really, really interesting.
Well, and to kind of dive a little deeper into this hypothetical you give of, can you imagine somebody who doesn't acknowledge that soft skills are important, but they're still a great leader? I think that's entirely possible, because, Up until this point, I've never given a thought to my soft skills. But you can be really good at relaying and educating and mentoring in a hard skill, right? And, you can be viewed as the best teacher of how to do this thing and not really have any sort of internal consideration about why you're a good teacher, right? Your students may know that of you. They know, oh, he's a great teacher because he's, patient and this and that, right? But you might never have that internal kind of consideration. So I think what's really cool about this episode is that if you guys can't tell, both Matt and I have become very excited about this, right? And I understand why for me, because this is a new concept for me to explore. But for you, again, being somebody who focuses really deeply on it, for you to have this realization in the middle and then all of a sudden be like, really like thinking deeply on it, that's really cool. So as we kind of start talking about making our actions count, one of the things I think you have to come into this whole thought with is that it is an opportunity for you to grow, arguably much easier than in almost any other skill set. Because learning, or developing your soft skills is just a matter of using them.
Yeah.
Right? You don't need an expensive computer software to learn how to do this, right? Like everybody should be excited. I'm excited. This is super cool. Okay. So, oh, great master of the soft skills, Matt, what do I need to do here? Tell me how I can start developing my soft skills more in like an actionable way.
Yeah.
Right?
So I think the first thing that I'm thinking that would have been a really great idea if we did about 35 minutes ago is actually like break down some examples of soft skills. Because we talked about soft skills being just people oriented stuff. We talked about communication, but like, let's just throw some of these things out there. So when we talk about soft skills, we're going to, leadership, communication, teamwork, active listening, adaptability, conflict resolution, cultural competency is huge, empathy, presentation skills, emotional intelligence, creativity, critical thinking, decision making, collaboration, flexibility. These are just kind of like a quick list of all of these. And the reason that I wanted to list them, and feel free to pause, rewind, listen to that list again, by no means an exhaustive list, to be clear. But I think what's really, really key is soft skills. And I think part of the reason that people don't develop them or think about developing them is they just see all of those skills as like one homogenous thing. And if I'm good at people, then I'm good at all of these things. If I'm not good with people, I'm not good at all of them. And that's just simply not true. Like all of those things that I listed and more are individual skills that you can practice, that you can develop, and that you can improve and grow at. So first thing that I would say is, do a little bit of a personal SWOT analysis. For those of you that aren't business school nerds like me, SWOT stands for strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat. The first two, strengths and weaknesses, is really, really where you want to focus on this list and say, okay, of this list of soft skills, what are the things that I'm good at? So maybe take this list and pick 3 things that you're like, you can hang your hat on. Like, I'm really, really flexible, really empathetic, and really great at problem solving, just as an example. Cool. Then you kind of do the opposite. You highlight or you circle the 3 that you're not as good at. So, well, I'm not awesome at conflict resolution. I can be a better active listener. And maybe I need to do some more work in terms of like my understanding of different cultures. My cultural competence needs work. Cool. So you've kind of assessed your strengths and your weaknesses, right? When you look at opportunities and threats, these kinds of are environmental things. So like in my day-to-day life, how important are the 3 things that I'm really good at? How important are the 3 things that I'm not as good at? And it really this process can allow you to draw a roadmap for what you need to think about growing. Because there's two different ways that we can think about developing these skills. We can really, really hone in on our areas of strength and say, I really want to be the absolute best at the three things that I'm already pretty good at. Or we can say, look, these three things that I'm not great at, really big gaps for me. And it turns out that in the work that I do, I come across people from a wide range of diverse backgrounds. And so the cultural competence is something that I really, really need to do some work in. So really that personal SWOT analysis of like, list all the soft skills, highlight the ones that you're great at, highlight the ones that you could do some work on, understand if either of those would be benefited from you putting some effort in. And I think by identifying what skills you want to develop, whether from a place of strength or from a place of deficit, that really can help you create the roadmap for how you can actually look to develop those specific skills.
I like that. And I think as a broader focus, that is a really great way to tackle it. I want to challenge it a little bit though. And the reason I say this is because these areas of skill are not terribly quantifiable. And I say that coming from like a technical perspective.
Sure.
Right? Saying like, it's one thing to say, I gotta drive 10 nails into a board.
Yeah.
And I know that I will hit 9 of them.
Yeah.
And I can improve and hit 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
But there's no real way to like quantifiably say I'm a good leader, right? Other than past experience and kind of a feeling about it. So if you were to say, let's say pick 2 of all of the things you mentioned that you feel most people are lacking in, that would be like hey, you want to start learning this? These are the 2 that I think you should probably focus on because you're probably lacking in it. What do you think those 2 might be?
Great question. I'm going to get to it. What I would say first, and this is going to be, you don't know it yet, but this is actually a really cool preview of our next episode. I think that too many people, when they think about how to measure stuff, get really caught up in measuring what happens at the end and not what happens during. And so why am I saying this? Well, you're right. People skills way harder to quantify than some of our tangible hard skills that we can, improve our efficiency and do that by demonstrated end outcomes.
Yeah.
The way that I think we need to think about measuring when it comes to soft skills is not so much the outputs, but the inputs that go in. So instead of thinking to myself, I'm going to be really focused on getting 10 out of 10 nails into the board, I'm going to be really focused on, am I swinging the hammer the best that I can? I know that if I optimize how I'm swinging the hammer, that my chances of getting 10 out of 10 nails are much, much better. But my focus is not the number of nails in the board, but it is in fact how I'm swinging it. So how does that translate? Well, if I'm going to really focus on developing these soft skills, have I actively practiced active listening? So have I, in every conversation or in one conversation a day, 10 conversations a week, whatever that is, like, am I putting in the work to say, I'm going to be a really good active listener for this next 10 minutes, and I'm going to put in the work. And so treating our inputs as more of the metric for success. So that's the first one. To answer your question, what 2 things? I'm going to narrow it down to 1. And really neat for any of you who listened to the episode with our dads. This is something that we talked about a lot in that episode, but it's something I'm very, very passionate about. I think the number 1 thing is curiosity. Yeah. There's for any of you that have watched Ted Lasso, there's the iconic dart scene where it's be curious, not judgmental, but that's a real thing. And so much of the core foundation of every one of these soft skills that I listed is curiosity. It takes curiosity to solve problems. It takes curiosity to be a good leader, because you have to be curious enough to care enough about the people that you're looking to lead. It takes curiosity to be a good listener because I have this genuine desire to know more from you. So I'm going to be more actively engaged in listening, right? It takes curiosity to be empathetic because I need to imagine what it is that you might be experiencing, and therefore I can better understand it with you. It takes curiosity to be good at cultural competence because I have to come from a place of, I want to learn more about you as opposed to, oh, you're not like me, right? And so curiosity is the number one thing that I think everybody needs to work on and is the underpinning of every single one of these soft skills.
Cool. I really like that. That to me is like, that's my roadmap now. Just be curious about all of it. That's super cool. Okay. I have absolutely loved this episode. I am so excited to continue recording today because now I'm all fired up. That's awesome. So as we kind of bring to a close here, is there anything else that you want to say on this topic?
Oh, so much, but we don't have the time. No, I just think that really when it comes down to it, I think that we need to know that the biggest wealth of knowledge, forget the internet, the greatest wealth of knowledge exists within people. And if our goal is to further learn and further develop, then the best way that we can learn to do that is by learning to interact with other people in a better way. And so I want to encourage everybody, your people skills are not static. Your people skills are very dynamic. They can be grown and improved, and you can get better at people.
Okay. Wow. All right. I don't think there's anything more that needs to be said from my end, so I'm just going to kick us into our gratitude here. One of the things that I value so much about you is that, in my perspective, you have taken a very unique approach at being a highly educated professional. Now, what do I mean by that? You know, there are lots of people that go to school for lots of different things, but for you to go and say, hey, I took a general business degree because I just wanted a grander scope of what business meant. I took a leadership degree. You know, I took a global leadership course. Like, those are concepts that would never have occurred to me to go and become educated in. And then you bring them back and you have brought all of that skill set and all of that knowledge together in a place that just allows you to be a better person and a better leader and a better worker, for lack of a better term, right? Like, it is an awe of me because your skill set, I'm in awe of you because your skill set is just so outside of what would have ever occurred to me to learn. And you have committed your life to it. And it blows me away, dude.
Thank you. That's really, really sweet. I appreciate that. I'm so grateful to you for being curious and for being open to thinking about this stuff in a different way. And you, more than anybody that I know, are so rigorously dedicated to improving yourself, and for you to be so open to shifting your own paradigm in the way that you think about this. I think that, and I hope that, you know, this is kind of able to kickstart your journey and just like unlock just even more things. And I'm grateful because you're so committed to being better for the people around you that I see the excitement in your eye right now and the concept of being able to take this. And I just see so much ability for you to like take this and just to absolutely like blow the minds of the people around you just by unlocking this like next level. And so I'm grateful for you being open to receiving like some of these sorts of like ideas.
Thank you. I'm excited too. All right, guys. This has been a great episode. I'm super pumped. This is another episode of the Millennials and Community podcast. Thank you for joining us. I hope you guys found as much value in this as I did. And you know, it's a really unique experience. I don't know how you feel about this, but this idea of being together for the weekend with our primary purpose of just recording all of these episodes. Because normally we're so stuck for time, and it's a pain in the butt to set up all the equipment and take it down and all this. So this has been really, really cool. And I'm excited for what's to come throughout the rest of the day and the rest of the episodes. You guys are going to get them at a slower pace, obviously, but I think it's going to lead to some really cool stuff. So, hey, do me a favor, share this podcast with someone, right? Make that part of your developing your soft skills, and be, curious, and share it with someone who think they could benefit from them, what I think is everybody. And join us for our next few episodes, because they're going to be pretty awesome.
And you know where to find us. Check out our Discord. Connect with us on social media, either on the Mac accounts or on our personal accounts. We're always excited to hear from you and chat with you and hear what you think about this episode.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.